Cornette has said that Dutch Mantell, who a lot of fans today probably remember as Zeb Coulter, had Glenn Jacobs down in Puerto Rico, and he called Cornette back when Cornette was running Smoky Mountain and asked Jim if he would book Glenn. So Glenn goes to Smoky Mountain, Cornette names him Unabomb, and he starts teaming with Eddie Gilbert and Al Snow there in Smoky Mountain, and they win the tag titles as the Dynamic Duo, not dudes. And they're using the name Doomsday. He would also win the USWA World title. He also wrestled one match, I believe, on TV for WCW in '93 against Sting. It was an enhancement match, so Sting goes over. When do you first remember hearing about Glenn? Was it when he was down in Smoky Mountain? And what was the company's opinion on him at the time?
No, Glenn, first time we ever heard of Glenn was the Survivor Series in Boston, where we had all the masked men for when Lawler had his issues.
93.
Jerry Jarrett recommended Glenn Jacobs to be one of the masked guys, and I don't believe that we used Glenn at that time, but he came down, big bastard. Then we did the Isaac Yankem stuff with him, and sent him away to go away. So at this point in time, he had been to Puerto Rico. He had worked a while down there, and now he's working in Smoky Mountain. And Cornette had said that he was doing really well in Smoky Mountain, and we had seen the tapes.
So summer of '95, you guys bring him up and make him an evil dentist, Dr. Isaac Yankem. And bear with me here, because I don't know when we'll talk about this again. The rumor and innuendo is that Vince had a dentist appointment that didn't go that well, and he decided that nobody likes going to the dentist, and this would make a great gimmick. So he creates Dr. Isaac Yankem. Who the hell booked this gimmick, and how snake bit was this shit from the word go?
Well, first of all, it was Bobby Heenan's idea. And Bobby always had this, whenever somebody go to the dentist, he would go, I'm going to see old Dr. I Yankem, huh? You're going to see Dr. Yankem, Dr. I Yankem. So it was a Bobby Heenan thing, and we were talking about different professions that people hate. And Bobby said, make him a dentist. But he's got to be a dentist with really nasty teeth. And his teeth are all crooked and black. And that's a weasel creation that we went with.
Well, he got a big push right away, probably because he's a big old dude. And he wrestles Bret Hart at SummerSlam 95. Of course, the gimmick doesn't last very long. And he's gone not too much longer after that. The next time we see him, though, is September of 96. He debuts as Diesel. Of course, he's the fake Diesel, and there's a fake Razor with Rick Bogner. We've talked about that here before on the show. But whose idea was it when you guys were looking for, hey, we own the characters, let's just, make a new Diesel, new Razor? Who suggests Glenn Jacobs for that role?
I did, because we had used Glenn Jacobs in the casket for when Diesel was working with Undertaker. We used Glenn, we dressed him up like Diesel and put him in the casket for the live house. For television, we shot Diesel in the casket. So on TV, when you saw it, it was actually Diesel. But for the live house, we had Glenn Jacobs, and that just made us immediately go back to Glenn Jacobs.
Of course, in May of 97, Paul Bearer would come on Raw and start threatening The Undertaker that he was going to tell the world his biggest secret. And after a few weeks of this, Bearer told Taker that his younger brother was alive and coming to the WWF. So let's backtrack. When did you guys first have the idea, hey, The Undertaker has a brother? Did you know that the first time Paul Bearer came out and said, I'm going to tell the world your biggest secret? Did you already have the idea that you were going to create a brother? Or at that point?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Curious through how that goes down.
Finding opponents for The Undertaker is not the easiest task in the world. So you have to either create other Undertakers. You have to sometimes create opponents for him. He's a unique character, and it's tough to make someone believably competitive with The Undertaker. So as we were looking for different talent and different people to come in and who's going to work with who, and you're trying to lay out your year, your next 6 months, and you go, God, he's beating everybody. This is not a credible opponent. That's not a credible opponent. We need to create something for him. And I just started freestyling. There you go. You like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what if The Undertaker had a brother? And as I'm going through this whole thing, and I'm literally just thinking out loud, what if The Undertaker had a brother that he thought was dead, but in reality, he lived, and he's been living away from The Undertaker, and he's hated The Undertaker his entire life. And we go back and we tell the story that The Undertaker, when he first came in, went by the name Kane the Undertaker, in memory and as a memorial to his brother Kane, who he thought had died as a small child. And I'm like, and if there was some way that Undertaker thought that he was responsible for the death of his younger brother.
When are you freestyling all this? What month and year?
Probably right before we came up with the whole, whenever Paul Bearer came out. It was probably sometime after WrestleMania.
Okay, so April, May.
May. Okay. Yeah. And I start going on, and then and I start just going, what if there was a fire? What if there was a fire and Undertaker's parents died in the fire, and they told him that his brother died in the fire, but his brother was so disfigured, he got burned and mangled, and he was so disfigured that they thought he would die. But Paul Bearer, who was actually the mortician at the funeral home that his parents ran, actually raised his younger brother this entire time and kept him away from the Undertaker, and told Undertaker that his younger brother was dead when he really was alive. And Paul Bearer, on the other side, this evil, sick bastard, was raising his younger brother to hate his older brother, the Undertaker. And now it's time for revenge. And now his baby brother wants to finally face his older brother in the ring, and the only thing that the Undertaker has ever been successful in, and they finally will collide. And we came up with so much, just sick, funny stuff. That's how we got to the Paul Bearer being Kane's dad. Oh, yes, I was really doing the nasty with your mama, Undertaker. And Kane is mine. We just, we got out there with it. But I went off, and when I say I went off probably for a good 30, 40 minutes on just creating this story with what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
And he's burned and he's mangled, and we put him in a mask because the idea was, we were thinking about things to do with Glenn Jacobs, and he was the Unabomber, but I knew that Vince hated that hockey mask look. But I'm thinking we can put him in a mask, and we can cover his body up enough so that it's not Isaac Yankem. You had to cover up Isaac Yankem. So then we decided, well, his face would be disfigured. He has no voice. He can't talk from the fire, and all these horrible things that had happened to him in this fire as a child. And this entire time, Undertaker has thought that his baby brother died in a fire that he thought he set, that killed his parents and his brother. And then later on, we came up with the scenario that it was actually Paul Bearer who set the funeral home on fire. And it just went on from there. But Kane was something to bring to life the original idea behind The Undertaker of Kane, the Undertaker, the first man to ever commit murder. And someone so evil as to be the Undertaker's brother that could actually give him a run for his money that people would believe.
Who drew the original, like, artwork or design for what the Kane character would look like?
The creative services, I believe Debbie Bonanzio was the one, but I know she was in charge of creative services at the time. They're the ones that came up with the first concept of Kane. And then it was Terry, God, I can't think of Terry's last name. Terry the seamstress, who did the mask.
Redheaded Stitch is, I think, her name on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah. And she's the one that had a leather worker. And Terry was big into the Renaissance Festival and all that medieval stuff.
Yeah.
And so she had somebody that did a lot of that type of work. And she's the one that came up with the whole outfit and the mask, the first mask and everything.
Let's talk about the look. I imagine you guys wanted him to be eye to eye with Undertaker, and that's the reason he's got some lifts going on.
Well, they both have lifts. I mean, he was bigger than Undertaker, I think.
There's a famous shot out there that people have asked questions about for a long time, where the Undertaker's working a house show. I believe it's in Madison Square Garden, and he's sporting a cape. In the original drawings and incarnation of Kane, was he supposed to be wearing a cape, and why did that get switched up? Why didn't we see that?
Kane did wear a cape for a long time. He wore a cape to the ring for a while.
Well, I know he was wearing it on a lot of house shows. I don't remember seeing it on TV. I could be wrong on that, though.
Yeah, he did.
Did you imagine that there was going to be a long-term plan for Kane, or was the idea always that this is going to be something that's going to get us a few pay-per-views?
Honestly, we didn't know what we had. And we thought, okay, if this can get us maybe to WrestleMania and have the blow off at WrestleMania, great. This will be a winner. The fear was, what do you do with Kane after Undertaker? And we thought, well, you know what? We can send him away and bring him back as something else. Kane has gone on to be one of the longest running characters in WWE history.
Yeah, I mean, as we're doing this, if you're listening on Friday, he's been in the company with this character for 20 years and one day at this point. And he made a splash right away, of course. He's interfering in the main event, the very first ever Hell in a Cell. And he's feuding with The Undertaker. And they would do lots of silly gimmick matches, Inferno matches and such that I'm sure we'll cover in the future. But I think a lot of people overlooked that just 8 or 9 months after he debuted with this character, this is his third time in. He did the Evil Dentist, he did the Fake Diesel, and now in this third gimmick, 8 or 9 months in, he beat Stone Cold Steve Austin on pay-per-view to become the world champion. I think a lot of people overlooked that happened very quickly for him. So it's great that it was a huge success. And Cornette has said that if Glenn didn't work out here and the Kane gimmick didn't work, he was going to be fired. Do you recall that being the case, that there was a lot of pressure on Cornette for this to work?
Not on Cornette, no.
Okay. Let's talk about ripping the cage door off. How do you guys gimmick the cage door like that in the middle of a match with all the fans watching?
It was gimmicked from day one. It was gimmicked when it was hanging up.
So, but tell us how that happens. You guys have some sort of thin little piece of wood in there, just barely holding it in place, that as soon as you put any force to it, it breaks away?
Yeah, that's why, as you notice, Sarge and everybody was down there every time they opened it, being very careful how they opened and closed that door to make sure that it stayed on its hinges and make sure that, but it was just strong, almost like balsa wood that was in the hinges, so that when you applied pressure to it and you pulled it a certain way, if you pushed it the other way, it wouldn't have broken. But if you pull it to you, it'd break.
You talked a little bit earlier about Kane's voice, and of course you guys went through, and we're going to do lots of Kane episodes, I'm sure, but you talked a little bit about he couldn't talk. Was the idea to have him managed by Paul Bearer for a long time, to be the mouthpiece, and then ultimately, whose idea was it to have the little voice box gimmick? Did you guys know that right up front before you ever debuted him, or did that just sort of?
Oh my God, no, no, God, no. The voice box didn't come till years later, when Vince wanted to hear from Kane, and I had just been at a oh my God, I'm blank. A polling. I was voting, and there was a gentleman there who had the voice box, and I couldn't understand anything that he said. Don't ask me why. And I said, what if he had a voice box? Is it one of those gimmicks that he holds to his throat, like the people with throat cancer have? I said, there was just this guy out there. And I said, once I tuned into him and I could, get into it, you can understand what they're saying. And I love it, but that didn't come for years.
Right. You've told us
too one-dimensional. We got to hear from him.
Let's talk about the mask, because Kane's had several versions of this mask over the years. I mean, he even had a metal one there for a little while, but lots of different incarnations of the mask. And, of course, eventually he unmasks, and people would see that there was hair attached to it. And I think a lot of people for years thought that was all Kane's real hair. And at different times, there was more of his hair there than at other times. But chat me up about the different masks. When did you guys first see the mask? How many incarnations did you go through before Vince said, that's it? What do you recall about that?
We probably saw the first mask sometime in September or what have you. We liked them, but the mask just naturally evolved as he would get new ones and they would start to wear, and with the sweat and the smell would get to be kind of brutal, and he would just change up the design a little bit. But that was something that Glenn started to do. And as time went on, they just, changed up. There was never hair in the masks, ever, until that one night in the garden. That was always all Glenn's hair.
At different points, Kane wore like contacts and stuff too.
Yep.
Was that the plan from the very beginning, or when do you remember that becoming a thing?
Well, one eye, it was only one eye.
Right.
Because the one eye was damaged in the fire. Can't make this shit up.
I love that you said it so matter-of-factly, like, yeah, you dumbass. I mean, it was only the one eye. I mean,
yeah, the one that was damaged in the fire, damn it.
Yeah. Oh, when did you guys first see the mask and give the green light on, okay, this is what we want? We're in October.
Well, we saw the drawings, and we went through several of the different drawings and just picked that one. We liked the red and black because it looked very demonic, and it just represented, red. It was evil, red and black. It looked evil, and went with it. So we probably had the whole outfit. We probably had everything for him in September before that pay-per-view.
I'm sure we're going to cover, the first years of Kane very soon. Anything else you want to mention here before we move along from Kane? Because, what a debut. And I don't know that everybody listening knows this, but you have a couple of twin children, one boy, one girl. Your boy's name is?
Kane.
I mean, Kane is one of your proudest creations in the history of the wrestling business. Is that fair to say?
Without a doubt. And I still go back to, I wish Undertaker would have kept the name Kane, but I think it's cool the way that it evolved and the way that we finally got it out there, and that it still lives on as one of the longest WWF characters in its history. And as a matter of fact, my son's first baby pictures have the mask, wearing the mask.
Can you tweet out some pictures of whatever you have of your family and Kane, or the early mask? Because I know you have an old Kane mask laying around the house somewhere, right?
Yes, I have the original sitting over there on my shelf.
Well, we asked you to tweet something out last week, and you didn't. Can you do it this time, you think?
Maybe.